Thank you so much for taking the time to be with me today and to talk all about language arts and book clubs and reading comprehension and how you can implement Pixton into your language arts lessons, units, all that jazz. I'm super excited about it. I have tons of practical ideas for you today. And yeah, I just want to start by introducing myself. I'm Sam. I am the educator communication specialist at Pixton. So I run the social media at Pixton. I do some of the marketing. And my favorite part about my job is that I get to interact with educators. I was a teacher myself for 4 years. I taught from kindergarten all the way to grade 7. So a huge range of elementary school. And while I absolutely loved it, I'm also super happy to be in this role now and to be able to help you and bring fun to the classroom. So we're going to get started, and I'm going to share my screen. Please let me know, maybe even just by chatting in the Q&A that you can see my screen. Can you see it? Awesome. Thank you. And it should say enhancing language arts using Pixton. So if it doesn't say that, please let me know. Okay, so as I said, today we're diving into how Pixton can revolutionize reading comprehension, enhance book club discussions in your classroom, and generally bring your language arts to life. My goal here is to give you really practical tips and ideas that you could bring into your classroom tomorrow if you're not on spring break right now, which I know some people are, or next week or the week after. I want you to be able to walk away from this thinking, okay, I've got some tools in my back pocket and I'm ready to take on my book club or novel study or reading comprehension assessments. So today, our agenda is packed with creative ways to integrate comics into your curriculum, and I'm really excited to get started. Oh, and I totally missed switching my slide. So the webinar is practical, creative ways to integrate Pixton into your language arts instruction. Today's goal is to provide you with ideas that will engage your students, enhance their learning experiences, and foster a deeper understanding and love for literature. So let's start with a little refresher. What is Pixton? I'm sure most of you already know, but simply put, it's a comic and avatar maker that is a huge tool for storytelling and for language arts. In more detail, it allows users to express their ideas, narratives, and concepts through customizable characters and themes. So I thought that we would make this a little bit more interesting and start with a little poll. So I'm going to stop my sharing, and what you should see on your screen is you should see a welcome poll. And I would love for you to fill out these questions, and then we will discuss them a little bit. And actually, now that I'm thinking back to my teacher days, let's say we'll give about 3 minutes to fill this out. So 3 minutes, and then I will share some of the results, which, by the way, are all anonymous. Got about 2 minutes to go and 50% participation already, so that's great. If you're just joining, we have about a minute and a half left until we're going to pause the poll and read some of our responses. So 1 more minute. I hope it's enough time. 30 seconds and we'll wrap the poll up. Okay, we're almost there. 10 more seconds to go, and then I'll share some of the results. Okay, thank you so much for participating in that. So you should all be able to see the results of this poll. I thought it'd be nice just to see what everyone's roles are and what grade they teach. So most of us are teachers, and we have quite a range of grade levels. So 58% elementary school, 25% middle school, 17% high school, and 1% adult education. That's awesome. And I also wanted to talk a bit about some of your answers to how you use Pixton in your classroom. So some people said this is their first time. They recently used it for a realistic fiction story, free story creation, narrative writing, math concepts. Okay, awesome. I'm super happy to see that. So we have a wide range of uses. Okay, let's get back to our screen sharing here. Alrighty, so now that we have thought a bit about how we might use Pixton in our classroom, let's talk about why comics. How can comics be a tool for language arts? So comics bridge the gap between visual and verbal learning. It makes complex ideas more accessible and engaging, as we know. They're not just entertaining. Comics are powerful tools for language development. They stimulate imagination and critical thinking. And something that's important to remember is that comics are concise. There's only so much room for text. So when our student is creating a comic, it forces them to achieve their objective using as few words as possible. So essentially, they have to convey what's essential in essentially they have to convey what's essential. I said essential twice. Sorry about that. Essentially, they have to convey whatever is most important in their comic, which really helps them kind of say things in their own words. And that's really helpful with ensuring that they're using the most important things from their text. So let's start off with reading comprehension. How can we use Pixton to assess reading comprehension? Well, when students create comic summaries, they visualize what they've read, clarifying their understanding, and they retain information more effectively. I know as a teacher that our time is super valuable. I know your time is very valuable. So today I'm just going to be going through a bunch of ideas that you can use in your classroom, and I'm excited to show them to you. So the first idea, well, simply put, this one you might have already thought of before, which is essentially you can ask your students to recreate the chapter that they just read in their book into a comic. You could also do this for an article or a magazine or even a song. So you can say to your students, okay, we've just read this chapter, we've just read this article. Now, summarize this in a comic. And you can also put a label on, let's say, how many panels you want them to use, because that will help them be a bit more concise in their thinking. You could also tell them to not use dialogue, just focus on the images. So there's different ways that they can create chapter summaries. And I always think it's an interesting way for you to see what each student deems as an important part of the text, because they are using those panels to display to you, like, this is what I think is essential. This is what I took from this. So what are they focusing on, right? So this is a simple but effective way of really knowing what they took from what they read. That's idea number one. Idea number two could be students creating a comic that depicts a character's internal conflict. So getting a student to create a comic that shows the internal conflict that a character could be having in the book that they're reading. This is a great way for them to also use a lot of our expressions that we have and actions. I think a lot of the time students forget that the facial expressions are there, but you could even say to them, okay, describe the internal conflict of this character using only their facial expressions, panels with only facial expressions, exactly like that. So yeah, exactly. So you could see here that, we've got this confused looking character. And I think that could be a really fun idea as well. The third idea is illustrating theme. So we actually have a lesson called Finding the Central Theme, and I am going to show you that right now. So let's get out of here, and we are going to go here. I'm hoping you can see the lesson. Give me a yes, we can in the Q&A if you can see it. Awesome. Okay. So it's really important to remember that there are hundreds of lesson plans that we have, and a lot of them have to do with language arts, as we know. This is a lesson that's probably more geared towards high school, but we have our brief description, which is that students will demonstrate an understanding of the central themes or ideas of a text. And these lesson plans come with everything you might need. So we've got the hook, we've got an activity, we have our closure and even differentiation. I'm not going to read through the whole thing, but I will be sending everybody a copy of the links to all of these so that you can always look back on them. And we have resources, we have links to different poems and different videos that might help you with this lesson as well. So we have an entire lesson all about finding the central theme, which I think can be a difficult concept for students. So when they have that visual, the visual aid, such as Pixton, or they are able to really express themselves through like pictures, that can be a really, really helpful tool as well. Okay, I'm going to go back to presenting. Okay. The fourth idea I have is expressing character relationships through comics. So this is a screenshot of a story starter that we have. And it says, by the way, this is to do with the book Holes. It says, create a comic that displays Stanley and Zero's friendship, show how their friendship develops. So we have started this, we've kind of given the student the prompt. You can find this under our story starters website link that I will also send you. And if the students are working on a specific novel, we also have a way for them to search up the characters from just that book. So and by the way, I'm also going to show you this later. So we have content packs that connect to a lot of different novels that you might possibly be reading in class. And if you just search a hashtag in the search bar of the comic maker, all of our content packs will come up. And if you're looking for a specific book, the way to find it could be just searching hashtag. And then, for example, as you can see here, it says hashtag Holes, and only the characters from Holes are going to show up, which is really helpful. So students can use comics to show the relationships between two different characters. Let's talk book clubs. Now, this is one of my favorite things to talk about because I remember when I was teaching, it was one of my first years, And I was running book clubs and I felt so overwhelmed because, I mean, every single one of my students was reading. I mean, there was 5 different books that we were reading in class, and I just didn't even know how to approach it. So I printed out like a thick stack of reading comprehension questions and just different. It was a booklet. It was a booklet this big, and it was like super daunting for my students. I remember putting it on their desk, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, do we have to fill out this entire thing? This is so scary." So I wanted to talk to you about ways that we can make book clubs more engaging, because we know that getting students to read can sometimes be a challenge. But as we also know, book clubs are a staple of our language arts programs, and they offer students a chance to discuss and dive deeper into literature. And so with Pixton, we can take these discussions to the next level, and we can make them even more exciting and even more engaging. Okay, the first idea is a simple comic book report. So instead of traditional book reports, students can summarize the book they've read through a comic strip. This format allows them to highlight the main events, the characters, and themes in a creative and concise way. A tip that I also wanted to mention, which I kind of touched on before, is that you can ask your students to create a book report with words or with dialogue or without any words. Again, I think that they can make these comics really powerful, even if there's no dialogue involved. And you can really see what they've taken as the most important themes of the book that they read. So this could be one idea, is you ask them, after we've read this book or after we've read this article, make a book report. The second idea is a diary, a character diary. So I have 2 options for you. The first one could be ask your students to take one character, and every time they read a chapter, they add another panel into a comic that is the chapter reflection. So they choose the character. It could be any character of the book, and every panel will be a different chapter. So it'd be like, Dear Diary, and then they kind of reflect on that chapter as if they were that character. The second idea is having multiple characters in the same diary. So this would be a series of panels showing an event from different perspectives. So let's say something really big happened in the book. You could ask your students to choose 3 different characters to each write their own panel that describes their perspective of that event. And that could be really cool because it encourages students to consider multiple viewpoints and understand character motivations and reactions. By the way, I should mention, if you have questions, feel free to type them in. I will likely answer them at the end, but who knows, I could also sprinkle some throughout as well. Okay, the third idea is character traits. So this is an example of a story starter that we have in the Pixton interface. And it's also about Holes. So it says, choose a main character from Holes, then think of 4 character traits of this character. For example, loyal, brave, hostile. For each trait, find 2 instances in the book when the character displayed each trait. Whenever possible, look for exact quotations by the character to use as proof. Something that's really awesome about our story starters is that you can edit, as the teacher, you can edit them. So if you went into the story starter and you remixed the comic, which again, I can show you later as well, then you can change the title from Holes to whatever book it is that you're reading. It doesn't have to be Holes, but we just started this off for you so that you can have it as kind of a template so that if you need it, it's there for you. But another way to use Pixton for your book clubs is to have your students reflect on the character traits of a specific character within the novel that you're reading. This is probably my favorite one. I don't know about you, but when I was growing up, I remember when we had to read, there would be like, okay, the teacher would say, choose 5 words that you don't understand and, write down the definition. And from whatever you're reading. And I would be like, okay, well, I write down the definition, but I still don't really understand what that means, or I kind of forget what the word means. So here's a cool idea. How about you have your students create a vocabulary comic? either illustrating key vocabulary words in the context of the story or words that they might not know. So have your students, let's say, choose 3 words from the chapter they just read, 3 words that they don't understand, that they don't know the meaning for. And they can create a panel like this. So they can put a caption that says the word, like maintenance, page 23, and then they put the definition within the speech bubble or just somewhere within the panel. And by the end, they can have a whole comic that has a different vocabulary word. And it's really, really helpful because they'll have that visual as well. So here I said, yes, showing the word in action helps in understanding and remembering new words. This was another thing I thought was kind of fun. I think people often forget that you can add your own photos as backgrounds to your panels. So you could have your students take a picture of the page that they're reading and then put that as the background of their panel. And then, here I just circled it. I actually just drew over it and I had my character jumping up, showing that she's remarkable, right? So this is the word that I didn't really understand. And I have my character describing the word remarkable just by the actions and by the whoosh around the character. So again, you can put your own photos as backgrounds of panels. And so you would take a photo of the page you're reading, put it as the background, and then describe the word that way. The 5th idea is inference comics. So as we know, inferring is a really important part of reading. And in order to help our students infer or predict what might be coming up, ask the students to depict a character's feelings, motivation, or predict future events based on the textual clues. So you can say to your students, okay, we just read this chapter. Now create a 5-panel comic that shows what you predict is going to happen coming up in the next chapter. And that way we can see, like, are they really understanding what they're reading? Are they putting the pieces together, or is there still some disconnect? The 6th idea is an alternative endings activity. So students can create comics that explore their own alternative endings to the book they're reading. This can lead to interesting discussions about plot development, character arcs, and creative storytelling. So I always find this really cool and a really good way to see if your students understand what they're reading as well, because you can see what they take forth with them, what they think is the most important, which characters that they're connected with, and they can also share their alternative endings at the end. And I think that would be a really fun activity and a really cool way to spark some good discussion. Speaking of discussion. Discussion comics. So you can have your students do this even as like homework or before they've read the chapter, before they've met with their book club. So before the book club meeting, members could create comic strips that pose questions or present opinions about the book. These strips can then be used as discussion prompts during the meeting, adding a creative and personal touch to the conversation. I wanted to show you something here. So students could create a comic, and actually, let's go into our Pixton app. Whoop. Okay. Students could create a comic, and it could just be one panel. You say to your student, okay, I need you to come to your book club meeting with one panel that has a question about what you're reading. So I just made up a random example here, and it says, why did Alex run away from school? Everything seemed totally fine. So this student comes in, they bring in this panel, okay? Then they share this comic with their friend, and their friend can continue the comic by answering the question. So one student makes this panel, they click done, they click done, and we won't name it today, but that's okay. They click share, and they allow remixing. They copy the comic that they've made, and then their friend gets the link, remixes the comic, and answers the question in their own way. So it's a cool way to have students collaborate and almost discuss through comics. So you can have multiple students working on one comic at the not at this exact same time, but multiple students working on the same comic. Okay. How are we doing, everybody? I hope you're all doing well. Okay, here's another idea. Another idea could be focusing on the author's point of view. So we also have a lesson called Author's Point of View, which really focuses on writing in first person. And I'm going to quickly show you that as well. So we have the brief description, which says students will be able to write from a first person point of view. This is typically for middle school ages, but I do want to point out that even though our lessons have grade levels, it doesn't mean you can't use it with whatever grade level you're teaching. And there's definitely ways to modify the lessons to make them more relatable to the age group that you're dealing with. So it says here, students should be familiar with elements of a story, such as character, setting, plot, conflict, and theme. And you could have your students create a comic that is in the point of view of the author of whatever book they're reading, or you could just talk to them about first person point of view and just about different perspectives. So this is definitely a great lesson to look into if you're talking to your class about point of view as well. And again, we have tons of resources that come with it, a remixable comic, everything is there for you. The 10th idea is collaborative projects. So while students at the moment can't work on the same comic at the same time, they can share comics with each other, as I said, and remix them together. So they can co-create comics in a way. Have one student start the beginning of the story, and then their classmates continue. So, for example, you could, after you've read a book, you could say to your students, okay, this student A is going to make a comic about the first part of the story. Then they're going to share that comic with their friend, and their friend is going to continue the comic with the middle of the story. And then they're going to share that with their other friend, and they're going to continue the comic with the end of the story. So you basically at the end will have a full story of whatever book you're reading, but it's made by different students. So it's kind of a workaround to get them to co-create. While they can't work on the comics at the same exact time, they can at least share them with each other. And that could be a really cool way to collaborate. Okay, something that I also think is super overlooked is our printable section. So in our printable section, we have tons of worksheets that are really awesome for drafting up comics. As you can see here, we have like a sequencing worksheet. So before students get going, they can use that to draft up their ideas. We have Venn diagrams. So if you wanted to print these out and have your students compare and contrast two different characters or, two different events that happen in the book, and then have them go on to Pixton and create that comic, that could be a great way for them to get their ideas flowing. We have concept maps, other sequence charts. We have tons. I mean, there's probably like 20 or 30. And let me just see here. Yeah, okay, here, cool things to print. So, speech bubbles, a lot of these I think are super overlooked, and they're really easy printables to help you with drafting or planning. Even writing news articles, retelling, summarizing, and these can be found in the printable section. So if you just go here under resources and you click on printables, then all of those are there for you. And all you have to do is click on it to print it, and you'll be able to download it or print it. I really wanted to take some time to focus on content packs and how they can be helpful for you. So we have tons of themed packs of backgrounds, characters, outfits, facial expressions, and more that you can use in the comic maker. A lot of them connect to literature, different books that are quite, important, not quite important, sorry, quite commonly read in the States, for example. And we've created all of the characters and all of the backgrounds that connect to those books. So, and by the way, every single week we're coming out with new stuff. So there's always new content packs being added to the list. So if you ever are wondering if there's a content pack for a book that you're reading, then definitely reach out to us and we can see if it's in the horizon. So in order to find the content packs, and by the way, you might be asking, well, what do I even use the content packs for? Well, let's say you're reading the book The Hatchet with your students, and you want them to create a comic about the hatchet. Instead of them creating the characters, from scratch, or instead of them searching for all the backgrounds they might need to use, all you would have to do is one of the following. Either you can go to content-packs.pixton.com and you can see if we have the content pack for that book, sorry. Or you can search in the comic maker using hashtags. So this is just a screenshot from the search bar. I typed in the hashtag and then I can see all of the books we're reading. And you can essentially, I'm just going to go here. Let's say we just start a new tab. I go here, I go hashtag hatchet. And all of the backgrounds that connect to the book will show up. That's incredibly useful because it saves a lot of time. It takes out a lot of the searching and it's really, really useful. And as you can see here, it says more results for hatchet in handheld props. Okay, so there's stuff in handheld props, in literary characters. And so it's really, really useful and a really important tool to use if you're running any book clubs in your classroom. So again, all you have to do to see, okay, is there a content pack about the book that we're reading, is you go into any of the search bars, you type in the hashtag, and you can scroll through so many different ones that we have. As well as also if you just go to the content packs site that we have here, you can also click on the literature category and you can scroll through and see what's available. Another thing that I wanted to share that is useful as well, if you're not aware of this, is the Help Center. So if you ever have questions about how to use a certain part of Pixton, you're new to Pixton and you need some help, there is a Help Center and there's lots of questions that are answered in that Help Center, which again, I will send you the link to at the end of this. We also have Comic School, which is an amazing resource as well. Essentially, they're learning modules to help you get the most out of Pixton. I think something that can be a bit challenging for some students is just understanding the elements of comics and how to use them to their advantage. If they're trying to express themselves, express their understanding of a book, or of any text really, it's important that they know how to utilize the elements of a comic and really how to show their understanding. So these are all modules that come with complete slide decks, complete lesson plans, and they can be really helpful to get your students understanding how to use Pixton in the best way possible. So I have to tell you, either I spoke way too fast. I don't know. I think I spoke way too fast, and I apologize for that. But I'm actually going to stop sharing, and I'm going to open up the floor and see if anybody has any questions. And yeah, and actually we already do. So let's see here. So this is really important. Sam, could you please make a demo on how to remix the comic? Yes, 100%. Let's do that. Okay. Let's get back to it. I'm going to share my screen. This is important if you want your students to be able to co-create or collab on a comic. So let's do that right now. Okay. By the way, this is also going to be recorded, so you can always go back and look if I'm going too fast. When a student is done their comic, they'll click on done, right? And we'll call this remix demo. Okay. So they're done their comic. Although it's taking a while to load, I apologize. Also just going to take a sip of water. And I'm going to have to refresh this. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, there we go. My comics. Here we go. Okay. So they're done their comic. They've saved the comic. And now they want to share it with a friend. So you click on the share button right under edit. But that's not enough. You have to make sure that you click on allow remixing. If you don't click on allow remixing, or if your student, doesn't click on allow remixing, then no one will be able to remix it. So click allow remixing, okay? Now it should be checked off in green. And then click on the link over here, which will automatically copy it. As you can see, it's copied to your clipboard. Open up a new tab. They can either send that to their friend or whatever's easiest. Share. And now when they put that link into their search bar here, you scroll down and it says remix this comic. And what that'll do is that'll open the comic in that student's comic bank. So remix this comic. I mean, for me, it's going to be kind of the same because I'm using the same login information. But like if I sent that to a friend or if I sent that to you, then you would be able to open up that comic in your own comic maker and start working on it. I hope that was helpful. If a student created a character in one comic, how do they save the character to reuse in another comic? That is such a good question. I love it. Okay, so this is the best and one of my favorite aspects of the comic maker. So actually, let's go back to this one that we were in here. So if we were to add a person, okay, so we're in the characters tab and we want to add a person and we want to create a character that we can then save for the future. So we go to custom characters and we click on new character. And then it'll take us through the avatar maker as per usual, okay? So we go through the avatar maker, we create the character, etc. Now, all of the characters that we've created are housed in this custom character bank. So what you need to do is you need to add a person, go to the custom tab, create the character here, and it'll be saved within your custom characters. So you could do it that way, or you could also go to the characters tab. Here, I'll show you in a second. The My Characters tab here. As you can see, obviously we didn't finish this character, so that's why it's gray. But if we were to have finished it, then it would show up. So you could also go here and click Create Character, but you can also do it straight up from just within the comic maker. I hope that answered your question. I see that we have a couple more. It's also important to note that, by the way, going back to remixing, is that remixing technically copies the comic. So you're not necessarily, students might not necessarily be working on the exact same comic because their avatar might come in, but that's essentially what it does. It copies the comic so they can work on it in their own, once they've logged into their own account. Someone asked, can they work on it at the same time? Not at the same time. No, that is a good question. Whatever they work on in their own account will be only saved into their own account, if that makes sense. So if they make any changes or edits, they need to then share that comic back with their friend, and it'll make a copy of it again. So it's kind of like a ongoing chain. Okay, and then someone also asked, can you talk a bit about using Pixton in the world language classroom? So I'm assuming what that means is, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I'm assuming what that means is if you're using it in a classroom that is English language learners or English as a second language. And actually, that will be an upcoming webinar. So there will be a whole webinar just dedicated to that. So keep an eye out. Okay, I clearly need to slow down. I apologize. Um, I gave us a full hour, and we're sitting at 40 minutes now, and I'm totally here to answer more questions and to open up the floor again. Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you got some tips that were useful and that you can take into your classroom tomorrow or next week. I will send you an email that has the links to all the lessons I mentioned, the copy of the slideshow so that you can have the ideas there for you, as well as the Help Center, Comic School, my email, any resources that I think would be helpful for you. And please continue asking questions if you have more. Could you please show us your email? Are you asking for my email? If you're asking for my email, it's sam@pixton.com. I am going to send that to everyone right now. So you can always email me whenever if you have any questions. And if you have any trouble with your own account, please email support. Our support team is incredible, and they will be happy to help out. And if for whatever reason you're not getting through, you always have my email as well.